Hey everyone, it's me, Goku! Don't forget to subscribe to UnrealEntGaming. Here, you'll find the latest Dragon Ball news and content. Also, don't forget to like the video and follow Unreal on both Instagram and Twitter.
Kakarot! You, Kakarot, you will be the first to turn on notifications and give this video a like right now, or else I'll destroy you!
August 19th, 2022, the Granolah Saga enters into its final moments of the story with a grueling battle showcasing Universe 7's most powerful warriors, in having some of Universe 7's mightiest warriors be shown going head-to-head for one final showdown in order to see which side would emerge victorious. That is until the world was then met by an unexpected and surprising visit by none other than Frieza, who not only went along ahead to take care of the problem that Goku, Granolah, and Vegeta were struggling with, but Frieza had also went along ahead to put both Vegeta and Goku down with just one shot, after later revealing to everyone that Frieza in fact has a new black transformation, in which not only had resulted in having to end the story off on a massive cliffhanger, but this itself had left the audience to wonder as to who the true strongest warrior in Universe 7 actually was, which on top of everything that Frieza was shown doing, ultimately from there had begged the question on whether or not Goku and Vegeta are going to be able to remotely even come close in stopping Black Frieza, after later having to find out that Frieza had been training within the time chamber for 10 years, as this in and of itself had sparked such a conversation that fast forward 4 months later, on December 20th, 2022, after going on a several-month break, the Dragon Ball Super manga returned with a new story to tell, only this time, it wasn't quite the story that anyone had expected would take place within the Dragon Ball Super manga, since the events were being retold directly from the Dragon Ball Super superhero movie, in which with that, we now go as far as to tell the tale of the Dragon Ball Super superhero manga arc taking place following the adaptation of the Dragon Ball Super superhero movie. Now, the prequel events following what happened prior to the arrival of the Gammas along with Cell Max had began on December 20th, 2022, with Dragon Ball Super manga chapter number 88, which immediately had opened up with Goku and Vegeta on Beerus' planet, as we not only take a look at seeing what happened after the two were then shown having to make their way back from Granolah's planet, but with Whis, Beerus, and Goku shown eating away, the only other individual in this case who was not shown appearing to have a good time was in fact Vegeta, and for good enough reason too, because while everyone else was relaxing, Vegeta instead had been focusing more or less in setting his sights in wanting to obliterate Black Frieza, as in the meantime, when then going back onto planet Earth, however, it looks like the boys Goten and Trunks were not only shown in having to finally age, but they were also shown having to fight crime and stop criminals along the way, but they did it not only as Goten and Trunks, but they were instead now shown having to do so as Saiyaman X1 and Saiyaman X2, their new superhero identities. Now, similar to that of the Great Saiyaman that Gohan was shown having to mainly portray in Dragon Ball Z, not only was this used in a way to pay respects to the original concept of the Great Saiyaman, but it was also further established by Goten and Trunks that the main reason as to why they were shown having to do this was because they were also directly inspired by another more fictional superhero that went by the name of Clean God. But not only did Chapter 88 go as far as to establish both Goten and Trunks' motives in wanting to be superheroes, but it had also gone as far as to shed more light on showcasing more of the romantic side of Trunks, after it was later revealed that in fact Trunks did have a crush on Mai, but even despite being as nervous as he was in going as far as to ask Mai out directly, Chapter 88 itself is more grounded on featuring the elements of everyday life by taking a step back from all of the planet-shattering action, and instead going as far as to showcase the boys playing video games, going to school and interacting with friends, going on risky adventures, and mainly have the story be centered around its secondary characters rather than its primary characters such as Vegeta and Goku, in which towards the very end of Chapter 88, after Goten and Trunks had later made the discovery of Dr. Hedo's sinister plan, had only then prompted Goten and Trunks to quickly spring into action by not only going as far as to save their high school friends from danger, but they were both able to defeat Dr. Hedo's early prototype soldiers along the way, on top of having to steal a super secret hard drive that may have led to Dr. Hedo's downfall later on, which only then had now led us into entering into a new year, which ultimately means a new chapter for us to look forward to, as Dragon Ball Super Manga Chapter number 89 had been introduced on January 20th, 2023, which had immediately continued following the events of where we left off, with Trunks trying to do his best in doing what he could to crack into Dr. Hedo's hard drive bank, but he was only proven to be unsuccessful in his efforts to crack Dr. Hedo's hard drive until it was from out of nowhere where his little sister Bulla was from that point then shown having to step in actually doing what her older brother couldn't, and that was successfully being shown having to crack Dr. Hedo's hard drive within seconds after having to attempt to do it, in thus now proving that not only was Trunks' little sister Bulla smarter than Trunks, but had seemed to have taken up more after her mother Bulma than anyone else, as Trunks later had then found himself taking Mai to school to, of course, avoid any child labor penalties. Of course, even though Mai is technically an older woman, Trunks ended up doing what his mother had instructed for him to do, only to later find himself locked in a very intense and heated rivalry with a new student that went by the name of Beta. However, Beta just wasn't your average student that went to the same high school as Trunks did, but instead, Beta in fact was an android that was programmed by Dr. Hedo after learning more about who was responsible for taking out his men and in fact where they came from, which had only prompted Dr. Hedo in having to learn more about who was responsible for stealing his hard drive, in having to in fact later find out that these individuals were in fact high school students. So, as Beta went on to outshine Trunks throughout the course of his entire time around him, Trunks ends up later finding out that indeed this wasn't just your regular ordinary student that happened to have went to the same high school as him, but instead, this was in fact a spy that was directly sent by Dr. Hedo to get back at the culprits that had gone as far as to ruin his plans. Beta number 1 ultimately ends up revealing himself to both Goten and Trunks, along with his initial plans of having to wipe them out for what they did, only to ultimately have both Goten and Trunks transform into Saiyaman X1 and Saiyaman X2, with Beta number 1 shown putting up a decent effort in pushing our heroes to use more of their power against him. Saiyaman X1 and Saiyaman X2 are ultimately victorious and successful enough in having to be shown taking Beta number 1 down, in thus momentarily having to go as far as to once again put a stop to Dr. Hedo's plans yet again. However, even then things continue to get even more stressful for our heroes, as Dragon Ball Super Manga Chapter number 90 introduces both the beginning of the end for Dr. Hedo, along with what will inevitably end up taking place much later on, as not only was this the ultimate defining moment of having to reveal Dr. Hedo's secret plans, but the boys were also shown having to attend a local high school party, which prompted Mai into going with Trunks for the sole reason of uncovering Dr. Hedo's super secret plan, since Mai had assumed that Dr. Hedo would originally be there, especially after the fact of having to learn more about Dr. Hedo's idol and his favorite superhero known as Clean God having to attend this event. By no means did Mai assume that Dr. Hedo was not going to take the bait in showing up to this local high school party where they can catch him, but this was in fact going to be the ultimate trap set up by our heroes in having to take down Dr. Hedo for good, because it was with Dr. Hedo being shown having to attend this party with the sole purpose of having to take down Goten and Trunks for what they did. All hell ends up breaking loose during this local party after Dr. Hedo's identity was later revealed, in having everything erupt into utter chaos with Dr. Hedo briefly having to be shown escaping. However, this did not stop our heroes from having to chase Dr. Hedo down, because with Officer Krillin, Goten, and Trunks now on the move, they were all going to make sure to stop at nothing in taking Dr. Hedo down, and that was exactly what they ended up doing, because Dr. Hedo was hoping that the boys would end up following him, only for Dr. Hedo to end up unleashing a new dinosaur android called Dino Droid number 1, which had now forced our heroes into taking immediate action, firstly by trying to stop the new dinosaur android before anything else, which once they did through the power of teamwork, once Goten and Trunks transformed into Super Saiyans, Goten and Trunks were finally able to put a stop to Dr. Hedo's soldiers, as with Officer Krillin also presently there on the scene. This had only then resulted in Officer Krillin being shown making the biggest arrest of his career, and from that point finally making Dr. Hedo pay for all of the crimes that he was shown committing. But even then, we later find ourselves finally entering into Dragon Ball Super Manga Chapter number 91, which pretty much goes as far as to give us the opener to the Dragon Ball Super superhero movie, except only with a few minor changes to detail, including having Piccolo being shown picking Pan up from school, which also goes as far as to showcase the overwhelming amount of potential that Pan possesses even as a mere child. But sadly enough, one of the most disappointing and strangely bizarre moments had actually gone as far as to take place during this manga chapter, as it was only shortly after Dr. Hedo was shown being released from prison, where unlike the events that were shown taking place within the Dragon Ball Super superhero movie, we go as far as to see Krillin, who was actually able to tap into and lock onto the coordinates that led to the evil Red Ribbon leader Magenta's whereabouts, but sadly enough, only to later on see Krillin attempt to fight off and lose to one of Dr. Hedo's highly sophisticated android bees known as Hachimaru, which only went as far as to solidify the fact that yes, there was indeed a moment in time where Krillin of all people, one of the strongest warriors that Earth had ever produced, was from therefore shown bested and taken down in battle by an artificial and modified bee, which needless to say, as the chapter unfolds, we finally get to see more of Pan's training with Piccolo, along with finally getting the chance to see as to what Gohan had been up to this entire time, whereas everything had seemed to go according to plan as the sequence of events in the manga appeared to follow the sequence of events from the movie side by side. Dragon Ball Super manga chapter number 91, however, from that point then closes off with the unexpected arrival and attack on Piccolo by Gamma 2 and setting the stage for Gamma 2 to battle against Piccolo. But this is where things start to get very interesting, because from here, as we make our way on over into Dragon Ball Super manga chapter number 92, the opening portion of this manga chapter kicks off with our very first major of many fights to come involving both Gamma 2 and Piccolo, which at first there doesn't seem to be that big of a difference in their battle by comparison to that of the Dragon Ball Super superhero movie, as the overall battle itself within the manga, however, does appear to be much more brutal by comparison to that of the film. The battle within the manga involving Gamma 2 and Piccolo is a bit more intense and, dare I say, a bit more personal, since Gamma 2 is set out on a mission to prove his worth by taking down the quote villains of the world, beginning of course with none other than Piccolo, with Piccolo barely shown having to escape by the very end, which had ultimately later led to the discovery of the Red Ribbon Army and seeing what they were doing in secret, by not only in addition going as far as to reveal Dr. Hedo's plans in secretly having to be in cahoots with both Carmine and Magenta, but for Piccolo to also now get a glimpse of the Cell Max prototype that the Red Ribbon Army was secretly working on before his very eyes, which ultimately had led in Piccolo needing to get a hold of Goku and Vegeta just so they can be well aware of the overall situation here on Earth, which ultimately by the very end had now given us the first ever look of none other than Broly having to appear within the Dragon Ball Super manga himself, but this time not as a flashback, but in a very heated exchange against none other than Goku, who he was training with on Beerus' planet, which you can ultimately tell right off the gate that the overall fight involving Broly and Goku within the manga, even though it was much shorter than what we've seen go down within the movie, was by and large something that was very special, only because following the events of the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie, this was actually the very first time that we ever got to see what Broly had been up to following his initial battle against Goku and Vegeta on Earth, with Broly by and large during the midst of battle slowly but surely beginning to slip, with his rage beginning to shine on through. Dragon Ball Super manga chapter number 92 ends off on such a climatic cliffhanger, to which as we enter Dragon Ball Super manga chapter number 93, which basically opens up the chapter following a brief recap involving Broly's backstory from Dragon Ball Super Broly, which not only goes as far as to encompass the fact that just like Goku and Vegeta, with Broly possessing an incredible latent power, not only was Broly formidable enough and going as far as to push our heroes to the brinks of their actual power and forcing them to fuse, but with Goku deciding to spar with Broly and taking him under his wing and doing what he could in order to help Broly develop and control his berserker power, it was interestingly emphasized by Vegeta as Vegeta went on to confirm to Goku that there was something about their opponents from the past that had led Vegeta in having this epiphany and realizing as to where they currently stand by comparison to those opponents. Vegeta even went as far as to emphasize to Goku as to what exactly he meant by this, as Vegeta then went on to respond, Jiren, Broly, Moro, Gas, and now even Frieza. I was shown to be inferior to all of these foes in our recent years, and so what did they have that I had lacked? Well, it just means you gotta train your body more, right? Goku questions? No, incorrect, Vegeta responds. Our physical bodies have long been honed to their limits, and so in that respect, our training has already made us on par with those opponents, with Goku questioning, wait, really? Yes, for the key difference lies in how we wield our power, Vegeta responds, for there is still too much excess and too much wasted energy when we fight, and to command 100% of our power, we must force our bodies and spirits to relax outside of the moments when we attack. As all the while in the meantime, when then going back onto Earth and seeing as to how Piccolo was trying desperately and finding a solution, and not only going as far as to reach out to Goku and Vegeta, but since Piccolo already knew that he wasn't able to reach Goku and Vegeta courtesy of Bulma using her telecommunications device and reaching out to Whis, was when Piccolo had went as far as to take matters into his own hands by gathering the Dragon Balls together and wishing for his latent power to be unlocked, which similar to that of the film itself had gone as far as to follow each of these events tit for tat, as both Goku and Vegeta back on Beerus' planet were also from that point then shown having to spar, but all of the fun and games come to an end once we cross over into Dragon Ball Super Manga chapter number 94, which pretty much goes on to highlight the very moment where Pan was abducted by the Red Ribbon Army and having Piccolo fool Gohan into going after his daughter, as with all of the chaos that one could imagine from a parent's point of view and having to learn about their child being kidnapped, Gohan by no means was looking to play any sort of games nor take any prisoners in his quest of having to get his daughter back, as this had now become the very moment to which things were beginning to escalate even more, because from here on, with both Gamma 1 and Gamma 2 being shown having to stand firmly on their positions that it was in fact Gohan and his friends that were the true villains of this story, an immediate fight involving both Gamma 1 and Gohan was from that point then shown having to ensue, as the fight itself had seemed as though it was just as intense as it was within the Dragon Ball Super superhero movie, with everything mostly kept the same throughout the duration of their battle, with neither of the two willing to back down to the other, as their overall battle within the manga was shown having to keep the same intensity and pace almost identical to that of the film with the exception of a few minor changes and alterations. This chapter pretty much was everything that you can expect go down involving both Gamma 1 and Gohan, until of course Gohan had now decided to go ultimate towards the very end, and not willing to run the risk of having anything happen to Pan, so instead, Gohan was sure that he had made the right call by going all out towards the very end in promising the demise of Gamma 1 to begin with, which only then takes us going into Dragon Ball Super Manga chapter number 95, which essentially catapults their battle to a whole new level, with both Gamma 1 and Ultimate Gohan shown going back and forth despite their earlier power gap between them, because with Ultimate Gohan now in complete control by showcasing tremendous resiliency and determination while Gamma 2 engages with Piccolo, their overall battle within the Dragon Ball Super manga was shown to be far more barbaric and much more intense than what was shown going down within the Dragon Ball Super superhero movie, with neither party looking to let up against the other in fighting for what they each believe in, which in the Gamma's case was for justice and the sense of fulfillment in believing that Gohan and Piccolo were indeed the true villains of this entire story when in fact they weren't, as one of the many unique features that was included during this battle within the manga that was originally shown having to be missing from the movie, which was ultimately showcasing the tag team dynamic involving Piccolo and Ultimate Gohan and having to go up against both Gamma 1 and Gamma 2, because during their engagement against both of the Gammas, Piccolo and Gohan had presented a very unique sense of offense against them that was mainly attributed to their synergy and battle experience with one another in facing off against any opposition that was standing before them, which was proven to be effective enough in slowing each of the Gammas down during their initial engagements. However, by no means was this any sort of clear sign of victory for our heroes, because the Gammas were proven to be durable enough in enduring this, with both of the Gammas, mainly with Gamma 2 showcasing tremendous amounts of resiliency and enduring all of Piccolo's offense, which ultimately had led with Gamma 2 doing the exact same thing that he was shown doing within the movie itself, and that was go as far as to completely overtake Piccolo despite his massive power increase earlier by having Shenron grant his wish for him, which by the very end had ultimately led to Gamma 2 overtaking Piccolo completely, with Piccolo understanding the fact that he did not have the necessary power in not only going the distance to maintain himself, but even by going as far as to stop either of the Gammas to begin with, until, similar to the moment shown within the Dragon Ball Super superhero movie, as Piccolo's body was shown descending on down, it was only shortly after with Shenron's voice reminding Piccolo that he had given him a little bit of extra power to begin with, was when from out of nowhere a gigantic aura burst was shown coming up from the ground, as none other than Orange Piccolo for the very first time was shown having to be born in revealing himself against Gamma 2, as we kick off Dragon Ball Super Manga chapter number 96 back at Capsule Corp with Trunks being shown having to speak with his mother Bulma, to which upon Trunks now having to look flabbergasted by what he was overhearing, it was only as Trunks was shown having this conversation where Trunks went on to then respond, "Androids? Did that Hedo guy make them?" with Bulma then asking, "Why do you even know about that?" with Trunks then responding, well, cause we've fought some of his androids before, so these must be different ones though. Anyways, Piccolo is in big trouble and he's alone. The ones that we ran into the other times were pretty strong, with Bulma then asking, "Why did you keep this a secret?" with Trunks responding, "Mom, you already forbid me from any more hero stuff, and so it's not like you'd even listen to anything that we have to say." "Oh, well then that one is on me," Bulma responds. "If I had only known that maybe we could have prevented all of this." To which moments later, the moment Trunks was able to now spot Goten in the sky was when Trunks then went on to shout, "Hey, Goten! Oh, how's it going, Trunks?" "Oh, hiya, ma'am. We're just gonna go do some homework together," with Bulma then shouting, "Oh, you two are no longer grounded. This situation is dire, so let's get on out there and help Piccolo, okay? So now go and show them what you're made of," Bulma shouts, with Trunks then responding, "Oh, heck yeah! Got it, Goten? Here's our chance to be the great Saiyaman again." "Oh, wait, why?" Goten went on to then ask. ask? Well, word is that Hedo got out of the slammer and teamed up with some Red Ribbon Army guys. Whoa, no way, Goten responds. Let's go, time to get going, Bulma then went on to shout. Give me Piccolo's location already. His location? Just Piccolo's key. That way, I think. No, Goten went on to chime in. It's this way. Oh, well, maybe it could also be in that direction over there. Wait, that's Dende. Oh, you two, I swear, Bulma went on to respond. Really stepping it up when it counts, huh? Oh, forget it. Now I'll just call him and ask, Bulma then went on to respond. Now let's see if he picks up. To which even then, in the meantime, as we then make our way back on over in seeing the birth of Orange Piccolo for the very first time within the mainline series outside of the Dragon Ball Super superhero movie, Orange Piccolo's transformation was so impactful upon its debut that everyone who was there had stopped what they were doing only to simply gaze upon what they were now having to see, with Piccolo being shown having to step on down. The stage was now seemingly set for Orange Piccolo to be shown having to re-engage against Gamma 2, the same individual that was shown having to get the better of Piccolo, but this time around things were looking as though they were about to be very different, as we finally now meet Orange Piccolo and having to stand before Gamma 2 for the very first time after being shown having to ascend in shattering past all of his previous limitations. This was only now beginning to become a very big problem for the Gammas prior to having to engage. However, it was only then when having to make our way back on over to Bulma's was when Bulma was shown having to comment, nope, he's not picking up, with Trunks responding, actually, Kuririn might know where the secret base is since he was put on that case, with Bulma then responding, well, let's just have him join us then, and 18 would also be a good help to have on board too. But even then, Gamma 2 was not having it, because even despite with Piccolo being shown having to obtain a new godly transformation, what Gamma 2 ends up trying to do instead is still go after Orange Piccolo, even despite knowing the fact that Piccolo is much stronger than even how Gamma 2 is, but with his best efforts now being shown in vain despite having to be shown punching Piccolo directly in the abdominal section, by no means was this any sort of effective move that had left Piccolo damaged whatsoever, because as Gamma 2 was looking up in absolute horror with Piccolo being shown looking back down in not being shown having to be affected by Gamma 2's punch whatsoever, it was only prior to Gamma 2 being shown backing on up before attacking again, where none of Gamma 2's attacks were shown having to have any sort of effect on Piccolo whatsoever, even despite with Gamma 2 trying to do his best to do so. You can see when having to take a closer look at Gamma 2's face that Gamma 2 was really trying to damage Piccolo, only to from that point then be shown having to stand there in enduring and tanking each and every single one of Gamma 2's punches. That is, of course, before Orange Piccolo had now decided to retaliate by punching Gamma 2 in the face, to which as Piccolo was now shown having to do so, the sheer force behind Piccolo's punch alone was so effective enough in dropping Gamma 2 completely that it almost had now looked as though the fight between them had now quickly come to a close just before it even started to begin with, because with both Magenta and Carmine looking on in absolute disbelief as Gamma 2 was shown having to lay there, that was when Piccolo went on to then respond, well, Shenron wasn't kidding about that bit extra, huh? How? Dr. Hedo went on to then quickly ask. Oh, you moots just gonna stand around there? Magenta shouts, fire! Fill him full of lead! But of course, similar to that of the film, traditional bullets and guns weren't going to do anything to Piccolo to begin with, so with Piccolo being shown having to just stand there casually and taking all of the shots that were being fired upon him, that was when from within that very moment, Pan was now shown setting herself free and immediately going after the attack by attacking the soldiers below, in which, similar to that of the film with Pan being shown having to clear house before having to come face to face with Carmine, was when Carmine by no means was even going to go as far as to spare a child by being shown firing down upon her, until it was only with Gamma 2 being shown stepping in the way by firing off and having to shoot away Carmine's gun was when Gamma 2 then went on to respond, well, that settles it. I can tell which side fights for evil, to which upon Pan now being shown having to re-emerge, Pan from that point was not shown having to waste a single solitary second by from there being shown knocking Carmine out, which had only now subsided the battles that were now taking place as both parties had now come to a mutual understanding in realizing the situation at hand. It was just as Piccolo went on to address the overall situation where Piccolo then went on to respond, good enough, Gohan, you can quit fighting. Wait, what's going on, Gohan questions. Well, it seems like there was a misunderstanding on both sides, Piccolo responds, to which even then, in the meantime, similar to that of the events that have transpired within the Dragon Ball Super superhero movie, after having to now realize that the jig was up moments after having to see Piccolo and Gohan now actually come to reason with both Gamma 1 and Gamma 2, what the Red Ribbon leader Magenta ends up trying to do is quickly go and do whatever he could to activate Cell Max, since he knows that it's pretty much over and done with the Gammas, only for Dr. Hedo to be shown having to try and stop him, as the two are now locked in a very intense battle against one another, with one guy being shown having to try and do his absolute best to awaken the sleeping monster within upon the world while the other was trying to stop him. Their struggle ultimately leads to Magenta firing up all possible measures that he could in order to finally extract his revenge and put an end to our heroes for good, but this was by no means going to be an easy effort being shown by Magenta and having to pull off successfully without Dr. Hedo being shown standing in his way, because with Dr. Hedo revealing a few secrets of his own, including weaponizing Hachimaru against Magenta, it was just then similar to that of the events of the movie, as with one fatal sting to the neck followed by a couple of dance moves later, everyone's worst possible nightmare was about to come true, because as soon as Magenta had died after being shown smashing down on any and all possible buttons that he could, the entirety of the overall situation now had become so unstable and so uncontrollable even for Dr. Hedo that Cell Max's chamber was just about to explode, with Cell Max being shown having to burst on out, in which prior to this, as we only then make our way back on over onto the surface in seeing how the rest of the gang had arrived onto the battlefield, as with everyone shown having to try and do their very best and understanding what was taking place moments prior, it was only as Goten and Trunks were now shown stepping on down was when Goten then went on to respond, "Oh, Gohan, well, it's not every day that you join a fight," with Gohan being shown very irritated by responding, "Ugh, that voice, is that you, Goten? Hey, where are your glasses?" Daddy Pan went on to ask. "Well, I tossed them aside earlier," Gohan responds. "Well, I've brought some stellar backup for you guys," Bulma went on to chime in, "and of course, one less reliable cop." "Oh hey, believe it or not," Krillin responds, "the police have been trying to thwart the Red Ribbon Army's ambitions as best as they could right now, so it looks like Piccolo had just beat us to the punch in finding their secret base though." "Aw, and now look who's here. How are you, Pan?" Bulma then went on to question. "And I suppose that those are the new androids?" 18 went on to question. "Whoa, they look so cool," Goten went on to respond. "Yeah. Hey, do you guys have any names?" "We're the Gammas," Gamma 1 responds. "Whoa, and so are you guys friends or foes?" With Piccolo then responding, "Wait, are those two really?" "Yeah," Pan responds, "that's Trunks and Goten." "Wow, they shot up like weeds since the last time I saw them," Piccolo responds. "Well, we Saiyans tend to remain short until we hit our growth spurt after all," Gohan responds. "Hey, so what's the stitch, Gohan? Weren't you just fighting them?" With Gohan responding, "Excuse me?" "Whoa, it's you, Krillin. Sorry about that. My eyes are just awful without my glasses." "Wait, but your eyesight improves when you transform?" Piccolo questions. I guess so." "Well, you see, I lost to Piccolo after he turned orange," Gamma 2 went on to address Trunks by telling him. "Wait, orange?" Trunks asks. "Is that a new transformation, Piccolo?" "Wait, what's that now?" Piccolo asks. "Yeah," Gohan responds, "you turned orange earlier when your ki just skyrocketed." "Well, I didn't realize," Piccolo responds. "I must have just had an awakening of sorts like you." "Yeah, and it was the coolest," Piccolo, Pan responds. "So you'll have to come up with a name like Super Saiyan." "A name?" Piccolo responds. "Must I? Ugh, fine. Let's just go with orange, Piccolo." "Oh, wow. Okay," everyone else responds. But just when our heroes had now assumed the position of there having to finally be peace among them was when they were now moments away from their worst nightmare and having to come true, with a gigantic explosion now being shown taking place behind Gohan, because in the distance flying up towards the sky was one half of Cell Max's containment chamber, to which, with everyone now being left baffled as to what this was, we then make our way over back to Dr. Hedo, with Dr. Hedo being shown absolutely horrified by what he was about to see, because it was only seconds after the fact, with two gigantic hands being shown clambering on down and slowly being shown having to hoist themselves up, Dr. Hedo was left mortified as to what he was about to see, as of course Cell Max was an incomplete project that he was looking to finish, unbeknownst to Magenta having to now set him free, because with Cell Max now having to be shown finally revealing himself in letting out a ferocious and powerful roar, this scream in and of itself was so loud that it only prompted for everyone to cover their ears, as they did not know as to what was going on beneath them until, in an effort of trying to preserve his life, as Dr. Hedo was now shown emerging from the ground below, was when Dr. Hedo then went on to shout, he's Cell Max! He's activated!" "He is," the Gammas both went on to then question, and boy was this a reason for everyone to panic, because upon Dr. Hedo being shown having to do his best in trying to escape, was when from out of nowhere behind him, that was when we finally got to see Cell Max having to now finally make his presence known, with everyone else that included Android 18, Krillin, Piccolo, and Gohan being left baffled, especially after having to see the very face that they had fought many years ago. This had only now become a very dangerous situation for all parties there, because it was only just after Cell Max was shown having to emerge from the ground below was when Cell Max had now powered up in such a way that the sheer force behind the energy that he was letting off had now caught Dr. Hedo in a massive explosion before everyone's eyes, which had also gone as far as to send out shockwaves that had rattled everybody on the battlefield, including Gamma 1 and Gamma 2, because even with the Gammas now understanding the gravity of the situation in having to now have no other choice but to engage with Cell Max, was when both of the Gammas had only presumed that Dr. Hedo was destroyed in this initial explosion upon having to see Dr. Hedo presumably be destroyed by Cell Max's energy blast. It was only seconds later behind the smoke was when Cell Max was shown having to do his best in trying to grab onto both Gammas, but as with the Gammas being shown having to be quick enough in escaping Cell Max's clutch, with both Gammas now preparing for battle, by no means were Gamma 1 or Gamma 2 going to back down from such a foe, even though they were inferior to Cell Max. What both Gammas ended up trying to do in the name of Dr. Hedo, their creator, was try and engage against Cell Max anyway, to which, as they ended up doing, the Gammas both tried to do their best in utilizing their weapons, in synchronizing their movements, in attacking as one, but unfortunately enough, to both of their dismay, it didn't look as though any of their efforts were actually doing much to even slow Cell Max down to begin with, because rather than being hurt or overwhelmed by the overall situation, Cell Max did not seem as though he was fazed by any of this whatsoever, even despite with Gamma 1 being shown kicking Cell Max in the face. What Cell Max ended up doing as a response was simply swat away Gamma 1 like a fly, by having to then from that point be shown having to attack the others yet again. It had only now become clear as day that neither of the Gammas were going to be any sort of match against Cell Max, to which, as the others were looking on, that's when Piccolo then went on to shout, "Let's go too!" with Krillin responding, "Our whole investigation was meant to just prevent this, but it looks like we're in for a battle anyway," with Piccolo turning towards Gohan and responding, "Here, Gohan, a senzu bean," but similar to that of the film, Gohan was shown having to fumble this massive opportunity and having to lose the senzu bean upon having to try to grab it, with Piccolo then responding, Did you just drop it?" Sorry, I just no glasses, remember? "Hey, you two were just fighting, right?" Goten and Trunks then went on to chime in. "Take a break, we can tackle this one. Ready, Goten?" "Oh yeah, it's been too long," Goten says. "Transform!" To which, unlike the film where we saw Goten and Trunks fuse, instead here we now have the re-emergence of both Saiyaman X1 and Saiyaman X2, as with both Goten and Trunks now ready to engage against Cell Max, was when the two went on to then respond, "Here to mop up evil and leaving the world cleaner than we found it. We are the cleanup heroes, Saiyaman X1 and Saiyaman X2 on the scene." And the only other person that wasn't cringing at this was, of course, none other than Pan, because with Pan being the only one to cheer them on, that was when Bulma went on to respond, "Oh, really now? Do they not realize that this isn't playtime?" Which basically concludes the events of Dragon Ball Super Manga Chapter number 96, as we kick off Dragon Ball Super Manga Chapter number 97 with both Saiyaman X1 and Saiyaman X2 being shown having to join Gamma 1 and 2 against Cell Max, as even with both of the Gammas themselves seemingly looking surprised in seeing two other additional heroes jump in to fight Cell Max by no means appears to be either intimidated or worried about the overall situation, because it was only just prior to Goten and Trunks even going as far as to touch Cell Max, where Cell Max ends up sideswiping both of them with his tail, and effectively now being shown having to put both of them down without putting much of an effort, with both Goten and Trunks on the floor seemingly very hurt by this, as comedically enough with Piccolo and Gohan showing expressions of both anger and disappointment, with the only one being shocked by this was of course Krillin. The boys really thought as though they were going to make some sort of a difference by going into this in their base forms to begin with, as even Bulma went on to then respond, "Thought so," with Piccolo questioning, "Have they been doing any training at all?" with Bulma responding, "Well, they've been grounded for over half a year, so no." "It's all great," Piccolo chimes back in. "We've got no choice but to rejoin the fight. Damn it, I should have just one more senzu bean in here." "Hey, relax, Piccolo, it's all good," Trunks went on to then quickly shout. "Heck, we haven't even gone Super Saiyan yet, and so you two just sit back and recover some more, okay? We'll keep the big guy occupied in the meantime," with Piccolo then responding, "Are they really up for this? Well, I have doubts." "Well, they do know how to step up when duty calls," Krillin responds. "I'd say just give the boys a shot," with Bulma then responding, "Oh, says the guy who doesn't even want to fight." "Who, me? No, that's not it," Krillin responds. But meanwhile, as both Gamma 1 and 2 had rejoined the fight and trying to do their best to stop Cell Max, but to no avail, it was only right then and there where Trunks went on to respond, "Hey, Gamma guy, that big bruiser just woke up, right? So it's kind of almost like he's not really used to moving his body around, right?" "You're not wrong," Gamma 1 responds. responds. And so Cell Max hasn't really quite figured out the best way to wield his power, which means that this moment is our best chance to bring him down. In which, with neither of the Gammas being shown wasting any more time, as both Goten and Trunks were now shown transforming into Super Saiyans, was when both Gamma 1 and 2 along with Super Saiyan Goten and Super Saiyan Trunks were now shown having to jump back in trying to do their best to alleviate the situation by having to put Cell Max down, especially knowing the fact that right now, to their own credit, they don't think that Cell Max is able to move fluently enough, as both Goten and Trunks were shown getting the better of him briefly. It almost had now appeared as though Cell Max was trying to swat flies out of the sky because of how fast everyone was moving, because overall, to their own detriment later on, it only had now appeared as though their theory was proven to be correct, because with their overall combined effort now being shown having to bring Cell Max down to his knees, as Cell Max was now shown struggling, through everyone's combined effort, there was nothing that seemingly Cell Max could do, at least in the beginning, to catch everyone off balance and putting them down for good, because it had only now appeared as though Goten and Trunks were shown having to hold the upper hand against Cell Max, as Gamma 2 went on to chime in, "Whoa, sick move, say Gamma 2. Don't they resemble us in a way? Oh yeah, that red cape's a spitting image of ours. Hey, do you remember what Dr. Hedo said about how when he was building us, when he based our designs off of a pair of super cool heroes who happened to have been his enemies at the time?" "Well, sure, it's all coming together now," Gamma 2 responds. In which, back on over onto the battlefield as Goten and Trunks were shown briefly celebrating, was when Trunks went on to chime in, "Hey, come on and let's finish this dude off ourselves." "Yeah," Goten responds. "Say him in," Gamma 1 shouts. "We are here to assist." As by no means Goten and Trunks were going to turn this opportunity down, because with everyone having to shout their names and getting into fighting position, we only from that point then find everyone having to throw down in a very interesting superhero pose as a complete unit, in almost kind of resembling that of the Ginyu Force, with the way everyone was having to pose down before attacking Cell Max again, because it was within that very moment as everyone was shown charging back in and combining all of their attacks together, was when all four of them had now gone as far as to shout, "Cyclone Style Tornado Super Hurricane!" As this quadruple attack itself had now gone as far as to merge itself in one in striking Cell Max directly, as one would only go as far as to assume that this would be the end of Cell Max if written in such a way, as unfortunately enough it ended up actually being the opposite, with no significant damage being dealt onto Cell Max's body, because even despite with Cell Max being shown crashing all throughout the landscape and going flying out into the distance, was when the boys went on to celebrate, as Gohan then went on to respond, "Oh yeah, just look at them go!" Well, despite the childish antics, Piccolo responds, "They've managed to really buy us some time." Well, Gohan feeling fit to fight again, with Gohan responding, "Sure, well enough to turn Super Saiyan anyways." To which of course this celebration was now proven to be short-lived, because as soon as Cell Max had now gone as to erupt by unleashing more of his power, was when things really began to heat up, especially with the way Cell Max was shown having to go about this, as Trunks then quickly went on to respond, "For real? So that didn't do a thing?" As of course it didn't, because the moment Cell Max was then shown having to jump right back in, and also from that point being shown increasing his speed, because as soon as Cell Max was casually shown having to one-shot both Goten and Trunks out of their Super Saiyan forms, including both of the Gammas, by no means was Cell Max willing to slow down, as even everyone that was watching this were seemingly very concerned by this, because one by one, as soon as Cell Max had gotten rid of Trunks, then Goten, and then having to pursue the Gammas, was when even the others had gone as far as to put this in question, as Krillin went on to respond, "How in the world? It's like Cell Max had changed up his moves." In which with one strike as Cell Max was now shown sending the Gammas flying away, was when Piccolo then went on to respond, "Oh, that monster, we weren't seeing that kind of speed a moment ago." "Yeah, and his powers just keep on building," Gohan went on to respond. "Oh, and I think he's getting used to fighting too." "Oh, fantastic," Piccolo responds, with Trunks chiming in, "Oh, yikes. We better whip out our last resort, Goten. And so now get ready for fusion," with Goten responding, "Fusion? Oh, well, I hope I remember how." In which seconds later, in typical fashion, similar to that of the film, as soon as Goten and Trunks were now shown having to fuse, was when as per usual they had now gone as far as to mess the fusion up and now giving birth to fat Gotenks, as even Gotenks themselves were now flabbergasted by this, but even then, they still had now gone as far as to try and turn Super Saiyan anyways, but to no avail, which had only now gone as far as to leave everybody else shocked by this, as Fat Tanks went on to respond, "Oh crap, even so I better let him have it." To which in actuality, Gotenks did not do a damn thing, but instead ends up getting himself one-shotted, as Piccolo then went on to ask, "Oh damn damn it, what are those numbskulls doing? We're out of time. Damn, come on, Gohan. Alright, hey, can you watch over Pan, Bulma? You got it, Bulma shouts, to which as Gohan and Piccolo were now shown powering up and jumping in, was when all that was left were both Android 18 and Krillin, was when 18 went on to chime in, fine, then here I go too if I must, to which as 18 was then shown joining, was when Krillin then went on to shout, oh, go team, yeah, I'll just be here protecting Bulma and Pan. Well, look at that, finally found yourself a task, did ya? Bulma then went on to comedically respond, to which even then with 18, Piccolo and Gohan shown jumping right back in and doing their best, or at least trying to get the better of Cell Max. In similar fashion to that of the film, it looked as though nothing they were doing, on top of even having to see Gohan fire off a Kamehameha, was proven to be ineffective enough against Cell Max, because even despite with all of their efforts being shown having to be used against Cell Max, had only now proven to enrage Cell Max that much more, and because of this had only now resulted in Cell Max's energy being shown blowing everybody away, as Gamma 1 went on to shout, damn it! No, aim for the top of his head! Why there, Gohan went on to ask. It's his only weak point. Dr. Hedo made sure that Cell Max had a weakness just in case it came down to this. Hey, but be warned, Gamma 2 went on to then quickly chime back in. The moment anyone nails that weak point, it'll trigger a massive explosion that'll obliterate every last one of Cell Max's cells and then some. And whoever does it won't survive, to which as everyone was now left in shock, both of the Gammas were now shown having to try anyway, with everyone being shown combining their efforts and doing the same, as Piccolo then went on to shout, alright, aim for the head, everyone! To which even then, surprisingly enough, it's not as though Cell Max didn't understand as to what everyone was trying to do, because as soon as Cell Max was then shown having to bob and weave, including having to be shown running away, and from that point making sure that none of their attacks were successful, it didn't appear as though anyone had any sort of luck in actually being able to land a successful shot, as Gohan went on to shout, oh yikes, he's really quick! Oh damn it, hitting the head's a big task when the guy won't sit still, 18 shouts. I better help out too, Krillin then went on to quickly shout by running in. Oh damn it, this isn't working, he needs to be held in place, Gamma 2 responds. Oh damn it, listen, I'll distract him and you blast him with your max power, Gamma 1 shouts. To which once again, in a coordinated effort as everyone was still trying to do the same in blasting the top of Cell Max's cranium, the only difference here by comparison to that of the film is it really looks as though everyone was struggling in landing a successful shot on his head. That was of course until Gamma 2 was shown above Cell Max and combining all of the energy he had into his weapon and firing down upon Cell Max, in which one would only go as far as to assume that even this itself would be enough to do any sort of damage in putting Cell Max down for good, because despite with Gamma 2 having to shout for Cell to chew on this, by from that point then being shown firing his gun and nailing Cell Max, did this itself had only now proven to be ineffective enough once again until Piccolo was then shown having to blast Cell Max from above, which had only momentarily gone as far as to stun Cell Max, but really not do any sort of significant damage that would make any sort of difference, because the moment Cell's body began to activate in emitting these laser-like energy blasts that had now gone as far as to rock the entire landscape, with everyone that was on the current battlefield trying to do their best in avoiding all of these laser beams, the only other individual that was left helpless by this was of course Pan, with Bulma having to notice this, which ultimately prompted Bulma in having to shout for Pan to retreat, to which as she was then shown doing, it almost looked as though Pan wasn't going to make it whatsoever, with Krillin having to take notice of this, because it was Krillin that had gone as far as to save Pan from inevitable danger, as Krillin then went on to respond, whoa, phew, that was a close call there. Whoa, thanks for the save, Bulma responds. Maybe I should just fire up the ship, so that, you know, we can just hightail it out of here just in case if it's necessary, you know? Oh, darn it, well that didn't work. We need to hit him harder, Piccolo went on to address the Gammas by telling them. Well, after thinking it over, yeah, there's only one other option left, Gamma 2 went on to respond. Hey, you mean... No, not that, Gamma 1 chimes in. No, don't even try it. Just don't, or at least I should join you at least, with Gamma 2 responding, nope, you already have a job, and that's to save Dr. Hedo. Wait, what? Listen, just take a peep with your bioform scope and see that he's not dead. Wait, what? Do you mean it? To which as Gamma 1 was now shown scouting the area and finding Dr. Hedo, Gamma 2's overall assessment in Dr. Hedo being alive was in fact correct, as Gamma 2 then went on to respond, you ought to be more observant, Gamma 1, to which as Gamma 2 was now alluding to his inevitable sacrifice, Dragon Ball Super Manga chapter number 97 then comes to a close, as we then open up with Dragon Ball Super Manga chapter number 98, to which as expected with Fat Gotenks not standing a chance and having to even come close in touching Cell Max. What ended up quickly taking place was not only having to see Cell Max knock Gotenks up in the air, but it was only upon with Android 18 now having to see this for herself in carrying on over by double axe handling Gotenks right back down onto the ground. The overall perceived idea was for Android 18 to assume that perhaps maybe Gotenks was going to be effective enough in cracking Cell Max's cranium, in which upon 18 being shown knocking Gotenks back down and Gotenks from that point then being shown crashing right into Cell Max, we indeed from that point actually end up seeing, similar to that of the film, where Gotenks was indeed able to crack Cell Max's cranium, which not only goes as far as to grab our hero's attention, and from all people, Gotenks being the one to actually make a difference here, but of course, once again, similar to that of the film with Gotenks being shown rubbing that in Cell Max's face, what Cell Max actually ends up doing here is unleashing a mouth blast that nearly ends up consuming Gotenks whole, which really had gone against 18's plan in assuming that Gotenks was going to make some sort of a difference here, until it was just when Gotenks was then shown running away as Cell Max was unleashing more of these mouth blasts, where Gohan then went on to comment, "Oh darn, they're not dealing enough damage." Alright, listen up people, I've got a favor to ask, Gamma 2 went on to then quickly cut in. I need you all to fire your ranged attacks at Cell Max at once from a safe distance, okay? You can go as far as to nail any part of him because that doesn't matter, with Gohan then questioning, "Wait, but what good is any of that really going to do?" with Gamma 2 responding, "I just need him pinned down for as long as possible, okay? The longer the better, so if you can manage to do that, then that'll allow me to make my big move, and when I do, I need you all to get very far away," with Gamma 1 then questioning, "Wait, do you truly mean to go through with this?" with Gamma 2 responding, "Well, you know it, and well, my mind is already made up," to which as Gamma 2 was then shown powering up, before being shown taking his leave, Gamma 2 wanted to reassure everyone to make this happen by any means, as even Gamma 1 knew that something was up in knowing the fact that Gamma 2 was about to do this, in which as Gamma 2 was then shown above the Earth's atmosphere as everyone else was battling Cell Max, was when Bulma went on to then question, what are they up to now? Wait, they're peppering him with all of these post shots at once? Oh, I get it now, they're creating some sort of an opening for that guy who flew up in the sky. And I think I'm needed too, Krillin then went on to shout, as even with Krillin joining the fight with Gamma 2 shown above the Earth's atmosphere and looking on down, in a spectacular fashion with Gamma 2 giving it his all and using all of the energy that he possibly could and now making his way back down to Earth, while everyone else was trying to get Cell Max's attention and making sure that Cell Max did not spot Gamma 2, it was only just when Gamma 2 was making his way back down was when Gohan went on to respond, "Oh, come on. Damn it, well we can forget about pinning him down because our shots are barely hitting him." "Oh, here it comes," Gamma 2 went on to then shout, as everyone else prepared for impact and knowing the fact that this was going to be the moment of truth, but before quickly taking their leave, what Krillin ended up doing is saving face by getting right in Cell Max's face, and instead of allowing for Krillin to feel useless, Krillin actually ended up doing exactly what he did in the film, and that was quickly and momentarily use the solar flare to blind Cell Max and not being able to spot Gamma 2, which I think was done in a very brilliant way in having Cell Max be this distracted as everyone was then shown having to take their leave. We only then begin to take a look in observing as to how fast Gamma 2 was making his way back down, because with the sheer amount of force that Gamma 2 was shown bringing on down with him, our heroes had immediately presumed that this was going to be it and that Gamma 2 was going to be the one to finish things until, interestingly enough, it was Piccolo that went as far as to spot something very unusual from Cell Max in having to take a look and noticing how Cell Max was actually able to spot Gamma 2 as Piccolo went on to then shout, "Oh crap!" because Piccolo knew, but even then with little time to do anything to prepare, what Cell Max ended up doing was sticking his arm up similar to that of the film as Gamma 2 came crashing on down, and further having to reinforce the idea that Cell Max was cognitive enough to know what was going on, as even with the gigantic explosion being shown taking place as Cell Max was shown struggling in noticing how Gamma 2 was in fact colliding against him, the only major difference that was shown taking place, again similar to that of the movie, was to simply see Gamma 2 be strong enough to rip right through Cell Max's arm but yet not penetrate his cranium, and that was simply because the solar flare did not work long enough to keep Cell Max distracted as he went on to spot Gamma 2, because by the end of it with Gamma 2 being shown collapsing as Krillin had assumed victory was when Piccolo went on to then respond, "Oh, not enough! He only severed an arm!" As to further go as far as to add even more insult to injury, even with Gamma 2's body lying lifeless beneath Cell Max, what Cell Max was attempting to do was simply go as far as to crush Gamma 2, but Piccolo was not allowing for this to happen, because once again, similar to that of the film, as soon as Piccolo went on to shout, "Not on my watch," was when Piccolo went on to transform, and from that point getting in between Gamma 2 and Cell Max's leg and making sure that Cell Max wasn't able to crush Gamma 2, as this of course is something very traditional blackmail of Piccolo to help his friends out during their time of need, but even then Piccolo wasn't alone during this, because with Gohan, Krillin, Gotenks, 18, and everyone else being shown firing off multiple attacks to garner Cell Max's attention, Gamma 1 ended up swooping on in to grab Gamma 2 by also thanking Piccolo, with Piccolo being shown still holding off Cell Max while Gamma 1 left. It was only just when Gamma 1 was shown leaving was when Piccolo went on to remember something that Krillin has said, as Krillin then went on to inform Piccolo by telling him, "Oh, just Piccolo, just grow!" "You mean yes," Krillin responds. "Way back when at the Tenkaichi Budokai when you turned into a giant." "Oh, right. I forgot about that," Piccolo responds, to which as Piccolo was slowly but surely now being shown getting bigger and bigger, we had now finally entered the moment from the movie where we get to see Giant Orange Piccolo being shown holding off Cell Max, as even Cell Max could not believe as to what he was seeing, as this was of course the first time Piccolo had become a giant in a very long time. I personally don't enjoy or like seeing Piccolo forget about this technique, but to see him use it was actually very effective, as by no means was Orange Piccolo going to stop there, because with Orange Piccolo being shown unleashing a mouth blast, with Cell Max being shown absolutely baffled by this itself yet again had also proven to be effective enough in knocking Cell Max far enough and having to create some distance between them, as even Gohan went on to acknowledge this by then responding, "Wow, Piccolo, you had that giant in you all along? Well, it looks like victory is ours then," with Piccolo responding, "Quit dreaming. Getting bigger doesn't actually make me stronger, Gohan. It's mostly a bluff. Oh, and right here, it's harder to fight in this size, but here you go," Piccolo says. "I've thought about a strategy," as he proceeded to pull out a senzu bean. "You should go ahead now and eat this last senzu bean," with Gohan responding, "But that one was meant for you. Listen up, Gohan. You could be the world's strongest if you ended up putting your mind to it," Piccolo says. "So I'm betting all of that on that power of yours, okay?" with Gohan responding, "Geez, Piccolo, just trust me. Believe in yourself and unleash everything you got, okay? Show us all your true power and use it to save the world," with Gohan responding, "Got it." But even just before Gohan was shown having to grab onto the senzu bean, from out of nowhere we then ended up seeing how Cell Max had unleashed yet another blast, and from that point being shown having to knock the senzu bean out of Piccolo's hand and onto the ground, as by no means was Cell Max going to allow for there to be any sort of room or growth between our characters, as he immediately had now gone as far as to attack both Gohan and Piccolo at the same time, as even with the others having to notice the senzu beam before they can even react, Cell Max had now gone as far as to increase his speed, so much so to which he was then shown knocking away both 18 and Krillin, but by no means was Gohan going to stay down for the duration of this time, as Gohan from there had gone as far as to remove some of the rubble from his back by then responding, "Oh, the last senzu bean," because Gohan knew that he needed to grab it, but once again by no means was Cell Max going to allow for Gohan to go as far as to grab onto the senzu bean, so what Cell Max ended up doing instead was grabbing onto Gohan's body before being shown slamming him down onto the ground, with even Bulma now being shown concerned by this, as Bulma went on to then respond, "Oh, are they going to be able to even pull this off? How are you doing, Pan? Did you happen to get hurt earlier? Where's Pan?" Bulma went on to worry by turning her head and having to notice that Pan was now gone, as with the only fighters left to fight off against Cell Max being Gotenks and Gamma 1, Gohan tried to do his very best in standing back up by noticing the senzu bean falling on down deeper and deeper into the caves below, as Gohan went on to respond, No, I'll never find it in that abyss." But before Gohan could even react, it was from out of nowhere to his side, as soon as Gohan had then noticed that someone was shown running right past him, was when this individual turned out to be none other than Pan, with Pan being shown having to leap on down into the abyss for the sole purpose of going as far as to get this senzu bean for her dad, as Gohan was shown having to be worried by this, but unlike the movie where Pan was shown having to fly by the very end, surprisingly enough to even Gohan's shock, Pan was shown having to emerge from below and now being shown flying and holding onto the senzu bean, with Gohan being shown absolutely baffled by this, as Gohan went on to shout, "You're flying! I'm doing it, Daddy! Here, I got the senzu bean," Pan shouts, to which upon Pan being shown throwing the senzu bean to Gohan, with Gohan now being shown eating it, it was now fairly evident that with Gohan back to his full power, it was only as Gohan went on to address his daughter where Gohan went on to respond, "Listen, Pan, tell Bulma to move the ship a little further away, okay, and wait for her there." "Okay, Daddy, fight real hard, okay," to which as Gohan was then shown going back into the fight against Cell Max, while being shown making his way there, the battle between Cell Max and Giant Orange Piccolo was indeed a very brutal one, because by no means was Giant Orange Piccolo willing to let up against Cell Max, despite Cell Max seemingly being stronger than Orange Piccolo. The overall brutality and the action involving Piccolo and Cell Max in this manga portrayal, I would even dare say, was much better and far superior than the events that were shown in the film, because not only was Giant Orange Piccolo able to get more offense on Cell Max, but was also shown putting up a relatively relatively very good fight, even to the points where as Cell Max was attacking Piccolo over and over again, Piccolo still kept fighting back anyway. That wasn't until the very end, as soon as Cell Max was shown pummeling Piccolo on down before being shown grabbing onto his skull, was when Cell Max had ravaged the landscape by dragging Piccolo's face all across the ground before throwing him out in the distance. But even then, Piccolo by no means was shown having to let up from this, which is why I enjoy this battle a lot more than what we've seen go down in the movie, because not only was Piccolo shown having to demonstrate impressive amount of speed, but also durability and resiliency, and even going as far as to catch Cell Max off guard several times during this battle, in creating enough distance and having to knock Cell Max back yet again, as it was only right before Cell Max was shown getting angry enough and trying to turn the fight around against Piccolo, was when from out of nowhere, that was when Ultimate Gohan had now inserted himself in this battle yet again by uppercutting Cell Max in the face and knocking him back, even to the point where we got to see an Ultimate Gohan and Giant Orange Piccolo combination, with Gohan shown firing multiple energy blasts down at Cell Max, as with the two not letting up and being shown having to knock Cell Max back into the abyss, and assuming that this was momentarily going to give them some time to breathe, Piccolo had then quickly noticed that this wasn't a moment of victory for them, but instead a moment for them to regroup, as Piccolo then went on to respond, "Alright, huddle up everyone and listen, Gohan, I'll do whatever it takes to knock that monster on down to the ground, and when the moment is right, I want you to fire off a blast, a Kamehameha or whatever, straight into his head with every last bit of power that you have, okay?" "Got it," Gohan responds, as Piccolo went on to then continue, "I'm serious, are you really hearing me? Every last bit, hold nothing back, okay? All of your strength in one doozy of an attack, got it?" "Okay," Gohan responds, but then it was just before our heroes had assumed victory, and from out of nowhere then seeing a gigantic aura burst being shown having to come from the ground below, was when our heroes were then suddenly met by the terrifying sight of Cell Max yet again, as similar to that of the finale of the Dragon Ball Super superhero movie, with Cell Max looking to end it all by having to destroy our heroes. We from that point ultimately then conclude Dragon Ball Super Manga Chapter number 98, as we kick off Dragon Ball Super Manga Chapter number 99 with Cell Max looking to be a much bigger threat now than how he was ever shown being before, as even with Orange Piccolo being shown putting all of his faith within Gohan and reassuring Gohan that he has to do this and being the one to take Cell Max down, it was just upon with the plan being agreed upon, with Gohan being shown powering up, as with Piccolo being shown having to once again insert himself back into the battle with Cell Max, was when all chaos was set loose upon Piccolo being shown having to engage with Cell Max once again, because even despite the fact that with Cell Max being shown unleashing a barrage of attacks that really went as far as to hurt Piccolo, while everyone else stood idly by and seeing Piccolo just get absolutely eviscerated and also being shown getting knocked down by Cell Max, was this only a moment where Piccolo went as far as to showcase more of his resolve in pleading for Gohan to go all out by having to unleash this one critical attack that could be a difference maker in this battle. The very second Piccolo went as far as to stand back up and having to re-enter the fight with Cell Max, even despite the fact of seeing Cell Max viciously make his way towards him, by no means was Piccolo shown having to admit any sort of fear of Cell Max, but instead had only gone as far as to connect a thunderous shot to Cell Max's face as Cell Max went on to do the same, which was ultimately identical to what we've seen go down in the movie, to which even with the two being shown having to separate, was when Cell Max was once again shown having to take the advantage in attacking Orange Piccolo by from that point using his tail before having to double axe handle him down onto the ground, which even then, despite all of this, Piccolo was refusing to back down, but instead had wanted to go as far as to buy Gohan the most amount of time that he could, which I only think goes as far as to say a lot about Orange Piccolo and the amount of durability that he has, because imagine having to be in a position where you have to endure this much punishment from this kind of enemy, only to want to refuse and having to go down, but instead buy as much time as you possibly could in holding Cell Max back, which was essentially what Piccolo was doing, to which even with Krillin having to acknowledge Gohan as he was shown having to power up, even Gohan himself knew that this battle involving Orange Piccolo and Cell Max wasn't going to last very long, so even despite with Gohan having to watch all of this go down right before his very eyes, he was still struggling to concentrate, as even despite with all of the punishment that Orange Piccolo was shown having to take, the only other individual thus far that, although fearful of what may happen, had the courage in standing on up to do something about this was none other than Fat Gotenks, as even with the others having to be shown quickly taking their leave and following Gotenks right back into the midst of battle, Cell Max by no means was bothered by any of this, but instead had taken the opportunity and having to go after everybody, which he ended up doing, because one by one, starting with Gotenks and then following up with Android 18, Cell Max began to make light work of everybody there by knocking them all away, until it was only just when Cell Max was shown getting rid of Krillin where Gamma 1 was back on the battlefield and having to charge up for a massive attack, but Cell Max by no means was looking to take any more attacks attacks by any of the Gammas, so instead, Cell Max had once again gone as far as to demonstrate his speed by teleporting out of the way, by from there being shown having to use his tail and knocking Gamma 1 back down, which was extremely brutal by the end because the only individuals left standing were in fact Orange Piccolo and Ultimate Gohan, in which even this with Gohan being shown struggling internally and having to pay attention and charging up enough power to finally get rid of Cell Max. Cell Max instead was by no means willing to slow down, but instead had charged on up in unleashing a devastating kick that was solely aimed for the purpose of damaging Orange Piccolo, only for Orange Piccolo to from that point be shown grabbing onto Cell's leg and refusing to back down, as even with Cell having to notice this, what Cell Max tried to do was use his tail as a means of catching Piccolo off guard, but Orange Piccolo was not having it. So upon Piccolo having to notice what Cell Max was about to do was when Orange Piccolo quickly went on to grab onto Cell Max's giant tail and stopping him from smashing it right into him, and from that point had immediately weaponized it by using it as a battering weapon against Cell Max himself. But this too didn't seem to last very long, because it was shortly after Piccolo had done this was when Cell Max had capitalized in unleashing a gigantic mouth blast at Piccolo, which ultimately had resulted in Piccolo's entire left arm being blown off his body, which only goes as far as to distract Gohan by making him that much more angrier as he's witnessing all of this go down as one of the last fighters standing, to which even as Gohan was from that point then shown having to do so as he was trying to power up was when Gohan then went on to respond, "No, Piccolo won't last much longer," with Piccolo having to shout, "I said stay back or this'll all have been for nothing! Don't make a move until your power surpasses his. No matter what happens to me, keep focusing!" To which this in and of itself did not last very long, only because the very second Cell Max had went right back on the attack and not giving Piccolo an inch for his troubles, Han and Bulma, as they were observing from their ship, are now forced to watch in utter horror as the massacre that was taking place below was only continuing to intensify that much more, as even they themselves, serving as innocent bystanders, had understood exactly what was on the line, including by having to see firsthand on how bad the overall situation that was taking place below was, in which soon after, with Cell Max launching Piccolo towards the sky above and preparing to end his life, this now became the very moment where Gohan was beginning to fear for Piccolo's life, and knowing that Piccolo had almost nothing left in the tank to continue, the entirety of the overall situation just seemed to be going from bad to worse as things kept going on until, despite with Piccolo being shown getting blasted above with Cell Max preparing to launch his final attack, which ultimately could have resulted in the end of Piccolo's life if no one had come to Piccolo's aid, in which the very second Piccolo's body was now beginning to descend on down, Gamma 1 had realized exactly what Cell Max was trying to now do, as by no means was Gamma 2 willing to risk someone else having to lose their lives in this battle against Cell Max. So what Gamma 1 ended up doing was Gamma 1 had decided to risk his own life as a way to stop Cell Max from destroying Orange Piccolo, with Gamma 1 immediately dashing in Piccolo's direction to ensure Piccolo's safety by having to get in between the blast, in which the very moment Gamma 1 was finally shown having to make it, Cell's blast was shown having to also finally connect, which ultimately had resulted in a gigantic explosion being shown taking place up above the sky, and Gohan looked devastated, because in a moment where Gohan had assumed that his longtime friend and mentor had been essentially vaporized, we slowly now begin to see how Gohan was beginning to slip into his power more and more and more the deeper he was beginning to think about this, because as Cell Max went on to proclaim his dominance over everyone by letting out a ferocious scream, this had only now become the very moment that we've all been waiting for, because just as Gohan was now shown having to do the same, Gohan erupts with a rage like no other, awakening a power which was far beyond Gohan's own understanding, echoing a force and a cry that was felt by everyone there, as the time had now finally arrived for Gohan's new and most powerful transformation to be born, with everyone including Krillin and Android 18 having to look on in absolute disbelief as to what they were seeing. This had now only marked the official beginning of Beast Gohan's debut within the Dragon Ball Super manga, as we finally now have the big reveal of Toyotaro's version of Beast Gohan within the Dragon Ball Super manga, and dare I say, this is only just for me, as I do happen to speak for myself and nobody else when I say that Beast Gohan in the Dragon Ball Super manga looks so much better than how he did in the Dragon Ball Super superhero movie, so you've got to give Toyotaro props for creating and designing Beast Gohan the way he does here, because although Gohan's hair is still a bit wacky in terms of its size, he looks so much more menacing in the manga than how he did in the movie, in which, similar now to the movie, with Cell Max being shown flipping out and preparing for a gigantic attack which he assumed that Gohan was not going to recover from, had become the very moment where Cell Max was then shown having to finally connect, only for absolutely nothing to happen happen upon the moment of contact, with Gohan still being shown having to stand there, with Gohan being shown keeping his composure and not removing his eyes from Cell whatsoever, was when the moment Gohan was from that point then shown removing his hand from his body and having to respond, "Is that all you've got? Because it's my turn now." To which the next thing you know, with one swift kick to Cell Max's gut, we then see a very amazing shot of Cell Max feeling the pain that Beast Gohan was now beginning to set upon him, as I ultimately once again do prefer as to what I'm seeing go down in the manga right now by comparison to that of the film. So hats off to Toyotaro for the amazing details of not only having to showcase Beast Gohan's transformation, but also the kick that he had delivered on Cell Max's gut, as just like we've seen go down in the movie with Cell Max sent out flying into the distance as Gohan had waited to see what was about to happen involving Cell Max, was when surprisingly enough from out of nowhere, that was when from behind Gohan, Piccolo's body was shown having to drop on down, except the only big difference here was that in the manga variation we see as to how Gamma 1 had created a barrier to protect Piccolo with, which was never the case in the movie, which is why I also prefer the manga version that much more, only because Gamma 1 is also shown doing that much more by comparison to his movie counterparts, in which the very second Gamma 1 had stood up in reminding Gohan that Piccolo will be okay but he has to finish this, was when once again Cell Max had made his re-entry by having to leap on up and screaming out in absolute rage by from that point then being shown raising his arm up, as within this very moment in time we know exactly as to what Cell Max is planning, we know exactly where this is all going, because with Cell Max now shown creating this gigantic ball of energy which almost kind of looks like the Revenge Death Ball based on its overall color design, we can only assume that Cell Max was ready to end it all, including by possibly destroying the entire planet if it meant taking out Gohan as a whole, which you can even see it from above Earth's atmosphere in the way Cell Max's attack had looked as he was even shown condensing it on down, as even Gohan himself had now realized that by no means could he have Cell Max actually have this attack hit Earth, otherwise everything would be destroyed, as it was right before Gohan was from that point then shown having to do anything about this, was when from out of nowhere one of Orange Piccolo's hands was shown having to extend on out in wrapping itself around Cell Max, in not only helping serve as being the driving factor which was going to keep Cell Max bound in place, but Piccolo knew that this was going to be their one and only opportunity to finish off Cell Max for good, as Piccolo from that point then went on to respond, "Oh no, not on my watch, you're going nowhere, now Gohan, do it!" As with Gohan now preparing and coming up with a solution to finally put down Cell Max for good, was when Cell Max almost kind of realized the situation that he was in, as by no means was Cell willing to back down whatsoever nor give up, but instead, Cell Max only continued to resist, even tugging Piccolo on forward as Piccolo was beginning to lose ground, but once again, just as he was shown serving the purpose in doing whatever it took to make sure that Cell Max had went down, was when Piccolo was shown, even despite getting his head kicked in, not willing to let go whatsoever, as Gohan in the distance was also now preparing for the Makan Kosampo, which is also known as the special beam cannon, which I think Toyotaro had captured perfectly, as even with Cell Max now looking absolutely petrified at the overall idea of being bound in place, with Gohan also preparing for a massive attack, was when yet again, similar to that of the film with Cell Max being shown using his wings in trying to fly away, was when Piccolo was shown doing everything within his own ability to make sure that A, Cell Max doesn't get away, and B, that Gohan was able to garner the time needed in order to use this special beam cannon to blast Cell Max into an oblivion, which ultimately enough, as Gohan was witnessing all of this go down, as he only needed just a little bit of time before he can use this, was when Cell Max was shown having to ravage the skies by dragging Piccolo along, until, little by little, we from that point then see how Gamma 1 was actually now able to blast one of Cell Max's wings completely off of his body, which was yet again another little additional feature that made use of every other character outside of just Piccolo and Gohan, because it was seconds after Gamma 1 was shown firing his gun and destroying one of Cell Max's wings, where Krillin now from out of nowhere had attempted to do the same by using his Destructo Disc to cut it, but instead what Krillin's Destructo Disc actually ended up doing was simply cracking Cell Max's last wing before from out of nowhere 18 was shown stepping on in, and immediately from that point shown having to descend on down and snapping his final wing in half, which only created that much more leeway for Piccolo to scream in utter rage for Gohan to finally now seize this opportunity to destroy Cell Max, because if there was ever a time for there to be any other moment where this was going to be the decisive factor in having to win, then this was going to be that very moment, as Piccolo wanted to reassure Gohan that it's either now or never, as it was only just before Beast Gohan was from that point shown having to fire off the Makan Kosampo, aka the Special Beam Cannon. We kick off Dragon Ball Super Manga Chapter number 100, the final chapter in the story of the retelling of the Dragon Ball Super superhero movie, with Beast Gohan finally having to be shown unleashing the power of the Special Beam Cannon, now having to be translated into a different name known as the Light of Death, which interestingly enough, with the first few pages having to showcase a colored variation of the final battle involving Orange Piccolo, Beast Gohan, and Cell Max, the moment Beast Gohan's Special Beam Cannon was shown having to collide against Cell Max's ultimate attack was when something very interesting was shown taking place, even for a moment by comparison to that of the film, and that was Beast Gohan was looking as though he was seemingly at a stalemate, and from that point being shown having to struggle in getting his beam to go directly through Cell's attack, which could either be interpreted in one of two ways, which that having to be number one, either Cell Max is a lot stronger than what we give him credit for, or number two, is that perhaps maybe Beast Gohan really isn't as strong as one would imagine, to which even with Gohan shown struggling and pushing the beam through, was when surprisingly enough, that was when from out of nowhere, Goten and Trunks were then shown having to circle back around, and from there being shown having to fly directly through and kicking Cell Max's hand away, because this was the hand that was used in pushing the attack into Gohan's, which had only then subsequently created room for Gohan to finally finish the job, as Krillin then went on to respond, "The boys, their fusion wore off," and this was the opportunity that Gohan was indeed looking for, in which with Gohan shown having to put even more power into his Makan Kosampo and now being able to fully pierce through Cell Max's attack, was when the end was essentially inevitable, with Gohan's attack being shown having to make contact with Cell Max's cranium, but it was only milliseconds just before contact was made was when Orange Piccolo was shown having to use both hands in keeping Cell Max's head still, which I do in my own opinion believe that this was a nice little addition in having to showcase more of the danger that Cell Max was in the story, but with the ending of this story being what it was, with the Special Beam Cannon shown going directly through, we can now safely put to rest the threat level that was of Cell Max, with Gohan being shown having to finally defeat him, to which, similar to that of the film with Piccolo letting go as Cell Max's body was shown descending on down, this had not only marked the end of a long battle to begin with involving the Red Ribbon Army and their most dangerous android to begin with, but we also get to see a really cool shot of both Beast Gohan and Piccolo having to acknowledge the overall situation following Cell Max's initial defeat, but even then, similar to that of the film, it didn't seem as though it was over necessarily yet, because with Krillin having to acknowledge the overall situation with Cell Max being defeated was when Krillin then went on to respond, "They did it! It's over! Hey, he's gonna blow! Get moving!" Gamma 1 then went on to quickly shout, which right before everyone was shown having to take off and leaving before Cell Max was shown exploding, was where from out of nowhere all you saw was Orange Piccolo's giant hands be shown grabbing onto Goten and Trunks' cape before having to take off, which I think is a pretty funny thing considering that Piccolo was their teacher ever since they were kids, only for Cell Max to then be shown exploding and creating a gigantic burst of energy that nearly caught everyone if they hadn't had left, in which moments later, as soon as the explosion was then shown having to subside, was when Bulma went on to look out her window by then responding, "Well, it's a good thing that we didn't stick around," with Pan uttering, "The big monster's gone." Well, I do hope that everyone's okay, in which as Bulma was then shown seeing Pan laugh after looking outside the window was when Bulma then went on to continue, "Well, I take it that they're just fine then?" In which back down below, similar to that of the film with Dr. Hedo and Gamma 1 still being shown having to be alive, was when all of the previous tension was now shown disappearing, only this time with Dr. Hedo and Gamma 1 suffering a great loss through Gamma 2, in which over on the other side with Pan looking for her dad and not knowing as to where he was when Pan then surprisingly stumbled upon none other than Beast Gohan and Orange Piccolo in their final transformations, which comedically enough went on to startle Pan because she had never seen her dad or Piccolo look the way they did, but once of course they were shown powering back down was when Pan quickly leapt into Gohan's arms, with Piccolo then being shown looking on over and seeing what had happened with Gamma 1 and Dr. Hedo was when Piccolo then went on to chime in, "Well, if anything, we couldn't have beaten that beast without their help," with Gohan responding, "Heck, and I wonder if Dad and Vegeta could have taken down that monstrous version of Cell too," with Piccolo responding, "And this is why I said that you can't afford to get rusty even during seemingly peaceful times, Gohan. Oh, right, sorry. And what, if I may ask, was that final attack?" Piccolo questions, with Gohan responding, "It was supposed to be the Light of Death." "You called that the Light of Death?" Piccolo questions, with Gohan responding, "It's just a poor imitation, I guess." guess? Well, it was brilliant, Piccolo acknowledges, to which back over with Gamma 2 finally shown having to evaporate and being dusted into the sky, was where through his noble sacrifice, it was acknowledged in the fact that without Gamma 2 that our heroes wouldn't have been able to do this, in which as Piccolo was shown having to approach from behind was when Piccolo then went on to ask, so he's gone? Yes, Gamma 1 responds, despite your best efforts to save him, with Piccolo asking, so what exactly did he do back there, with Gamma 1 having to respond, that was all of his energy unleashed in one massive burst, and well, it paid off because that initially had weakened that monster, Gamma 1 continues. Well, he really was a superhero, with Gamma 1 responding, thank you, as your efforts have saved the world as well. Oh, it's all my fault, Dr. Hedo went on to utter. I created Cell Max, and Gamma 2 paid for the price for my foolery. I mean, they exploited you too, Krillin went on to then quickly chime in. You didn't seem like a total villain before joining up with the Red Ribbon Army, you know, with Dr. Hedo shouting, no, I should have known better, I did know better, but the allure of research funding was just too great. Well, you've given androids a bad name, pal, 18 went on to then respond, with Bulma chiming in, honestly, it's a wonder that you survived all of this, with Dr. Hedo responding, right, well, you see, I've modified my skin and making it resilient against impacts. Oh, your actual skin, Bulma questions? Yeesh, that makes my own skin crawl. Well, like you didn't have your crow's feet removed, Trunks utters. Hey, some things just need to stay put, Trunks. So, and Goten, don't tell your mom about all of this, alright? Because if you did, then she'll tear me apart if she finds out that I dragged you into such a big battle, with Goten uttering, yes ma'am. So then, Dr. Hedo, right? What's your next move? With Hedo standing up and responding, well, I'll go and turn myself and Gamma 1 into the authorities, with Krillin responding, well, now I know that the entire point of this investigation was to arrest you, but I'm having second thoughts at this point. Right, Piccolo responds, so why don't we call it water under the bridge then? And well, even though you're not exactly good, but you're not evildoers either. But then, in that case, would Capsule Corporation be willing to hire Gamma and me? Hedo then went on to quickly plead. Oh, are you for real? 18 went on to shout. You can't be serious, with Krillin being shown pushing 18 back by responding, you're in no place to be asking for favors, okay, please? Well, do you know anything about beauty treatments, Bulma questions? Beauty, ma'am? Yeah, like making skin look younger, Bulma then questions? Naturally, I'm well versed in biology, and I do have a licensed practice in medicine, so that would be easy, yes. Well, sure, yes, then perfect. Your talents are of real interest to my company then, and to me personally, Bulma responds. Plus, you do in fact come with one heck of a bodyguard, and I can't have you out there conducting another dastardly plot, you know, with Dr. Hedo uttering, no, of course not, and I have completely given that up, with Bulma questioning, well, any thoughts, Piccolo? Well, I'm not opposed, so better to use him than the Dragon Balls for your stupid wishes, Bulma. Hey, that's enough out of you! Anyways, so that settles it then. You're hired, Bulma responds. Thank you so much, Dr. Hedo went on to then quickly respond. Hey, be grateful too, you know. Yes, thank you, Gamma 1 utters. In which towards the very end, with Piccolo being shown looking on over towards Pan, with Pan having a giant smile on her face, it was only from out of nowhere, similar to that of the film, with Pan now shown demonstrating that she in fact could actually fly, was where this in fact was a very touching moment for everyone, considering the fact that this was the beginning of so much more for Pan to come, in which we're comparing where Pan was in the beginning and not knowing much to where at the end, with Pan now being shown having to be able to fly, was where this had only now become a sign for many more great things to come. However, unlike the film, it only had now seemed as though there were in fact a few survivors from the Red Ribbon Army, with number 15 and Carmine being one of many of them, was when 15 went on to ask Carmine, you hanging in there, Carmine, sir? With Carmine uttering, yes. Damn it all, the commander's dead and our base lies in ruins. So then what's the plan now, sir? With Carmine responding, first things first. We go and return to Red Pharmaceuticals immediately. To which in the meantime, as this was shown going on, when then venturing on over back onto Beerus' planet, was where similar to that of the film, with Goku and Vegeta shown having to have one last struggle in battling against each other until the very end, was where neither of the two were willing to let up to the other, especially now in having a bit more of an extension to their fight by comparison to that of the film, because it was only during their exchange with both Goku and Vegeta shown exchanging heavy shots against one another was when Goku then went on to utter, how are you still on your feet? With Vegeta responding, oh, likewise, should just drop to the ground already. Oh, well, in that case, one last clash to decide it all, Vegeta utters with Goku, to which, as they were both shown slowly stepping forward, was when comedically enough both of them were shown having to exchange punches, with Goku's coming up just a tad bit short, and from that point only to have Vegeta be shown taking the lead by nudging Goku in the chest and dropping him on down, in which the very moment with Vegeta being the last of the two being shown standing with Goku admitting that he had lost, was when Vegeta had now been declared the victor, with Whis having to turn on over following his initial card play with Shilai, as Whis went on to then ask, "Oh, is that so? Well then I guess I declare Vegeta the victor," with Vegeta uttering, "I've done it at long last. I've bested Kakarot!" As one could only imagine as to how long this fight went on, with Shilai looking on over by then responding, "Oh, so they're finally done? Great, what a couple of numbskulls. It's crazy, don't you agree, Broly?" But unfortunately enough, with Broly being shown crying next to Lemmo, it only had now appeared as though Broly did agree, with Shilai having to continue, "Ugh, well that's meant for you, ridiculous," with Whis responding, "Well, I suppose that I should start repairing the ravaged landscape then. Oops, wait, now where did I leave that thing? Oh, there you are," Whis went on to look on over by his staff and responding, in which with everyone shown having to head back home courtesy of Bulma having to pilot her ship, was when Gohan then went on to tell Pan, "Well, I haven't realized that Pan's been growing up so much, you know, Piccolo, so maybe I shouldn't keep my nose to the grindstone so much, you know?" "Well, you don't say," Piccolo questions. "Yeah, and you know, I should have taken Pan out and about, like just to the amusement park or something, you know?" In which finally enough, with Whis shown having to answer the staff, with Bulma being shown taken back by this, was when Whis then went on to question, "Well, hello, did you need something, Bulma?" "Well, you took your sweet time, Whis." "Indeed, well, apologies for the delay," Whis responds. "Were you reaching out about some delicacy by any chance?" With Bulma responding, sure. Yeah, let's go with that, but the food's gone cold, so we'll have to wait until next time, alright? Bye-bye." Oh my, now what could that have been about, Whis questions? As even with Whis now having to be seemingly taken back by the overall news that was delivered, it was only right then and there now during that moment was when the entirety of the Dragon Ball Super superhero movie arc retelling had then finally come to a close. Which by the very end of this entire ordeal, I don't think that Dragon Ball Super Superhero the movie should have been adapted through the form of giving the manga its own story, because there weren't that many new things that were added within the manga variation of the retelling of the superhero movie by comparison to that of the film itself, with a few additional details and extended fights here and there that were sprinkled all throughout the story. But even then, whether you're a hardcore Dragon Ball fan or simply a casual just sticking on by, a lot of people agreed by the end that this entire ordeal didn't really need to happen in the manga to begin with, because with the sequence of events that have transpired in going from Moro to then later on with Granolah and then transitioning to that of the film itself felt a little underwhelming by the end, and a lot of the Dragon Ball fans within the community have all universally agreed by making their voices heard by suggesting that, hey, maybe this entire manga arc retelling truly didn't need to happen, especially with Dragon Ball Super Broly not getting its own arc to begin with. So I found it a little strange how they skipped over Broly, but they went with having to retell the Dragon Ball Super superhero movie instead, because they kind of went and did the exact same thing way back when during the events of the Resurrection F film, when they simply adapted only the beginning portion of the ROF movie in the manga. So it was quite underwhelming to see the overall direction that they went with by introducing the elements of Black Frieza taking down Goku and Vegeta simply by one-shotting them, all the way now and having to waste so much time by retelling a movie that essentially everybody who's a Dragon Ball fan had went and seen to begin with. So it didn't really make any sense as to why they had to drag this on, especially during the early portions of seeing why and how Dr. Hedo landed himself in prison, which is why I ultimately want to know what you guys think down in the comment section below on whether or not you guys agree or disagree with this perspective, especially with how many people had found this arc to be boring and quite possibly one of the most underwhelming arcs within Dragon Ball Super as a whole. So let us know what you all think down in the comment section below, to which as always we want to thank you all so much for watching and thank you all so very much for your time, to which once again, if you also just so happen to be new to the channel and of course love Dragon Ball and anime, then I do encourage for you all to head on over and smash that subscribe button, on top of making sure to give this video a big fat thumbs up by smashing that like button down below. Tune back in for more. Thank you all so much for your time, and with that being said, I appreciate you all for being here, and we'll be seeing each and every single one of you down in the comment section below and in the next video. Take it easy guys and have a great day. Peace.
Hello. Did you know that you can stay up to date with the latest Dragon Ball content by simply subscribing to UnrealEntGaming?
Also, don't forget to follow on these social media platforms, you sexy son of a bitch.
Roshi.
Silent Cell, me and the fans are having a moment. That's right. I know what you want. Extra long, thick Dragon Ball content. Quality reviews with flawless editing. Yeah, you'd like that, wouldn't you? You dirty bitch.
Roshi, the fuck?
God damn it, I need them to subscribe, Cell.
And we're demonetized.
Yeah, screw it. Let's cut to the video.